Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. We are in episode 6 of a 6-part series all about consultant pharmacists and the consultant pharmacist pathway. Today I am super lucky to have Reena Mehta on the podcast, who is a consultant pharmacist in critical care at King's College Hospital's NHS Trust. She's been working in critical care for over 15 years and has so much experience to offer us. And this episode is all about influence and advocating for our profession and showcasing what kind of impact pharmacists can make, not only within pharmacy, but on a national scale. I'm really excited to share some of Reena's memorable experiences in her journey, and let's introduce her to the podcast. Hello.
Hello, Nisha. Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. We're in episode 6, finally. I'm really excited. We've had so much educational information over the last 6 episodes, from talking about the kind of clinical skills and the competencies you need. We've talked about work-life balance and how stressful it can be to do this pathway.
Yeah.
How many years of experience that you need, the work that goes into the portfolio alongside balancing a job, potentially family life and other things in personal lives that people are experiencing. We've talked about career development just in general, and the foundation pharmacy framework and the differences between that and the advanced pharmacy framework, and kind of going into the consultant pathway. So we've had so much expertise here. We've even been lucky enough to have Anna on the podcast, who's talked about consultant pharmacist roles outside of hospital, because most of you guys are in hospital. So she works across primary, intermediate and secondary care as a consultant in diabetes. So we're really fortunate to have seen a real mix of skill set, experience and exposure. So, genuinely really happy to showcase this series. I'm really happy to have you on the podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into pharmacy.
Brilliant. It sounds like I need to listen to all the other podcasts. There's lots to learn. So my sort of journey started as in, I was quite fortunate to do my sort of pre-reg journey as a split. So I did community and I worked in hospital as well. And through that, I sort of realised that actually hospital was the way I wanted to go. So I did the usual sort of junior pharmacist. In those days, it was like the grade Bs to C progression. And I was part of a clinical services team, like a core team. And I was asked if I could do ward cover on critical care. And I was a bit like, that was always the daunting part when you're a junior pharmacist, thinking critical care, you don't want to go there. And I sort of set foot on there, and it was like really enlightening to see how different it was to what I was used to doing, especially when it was like medicine wards and surgical. And through that, I sort of realised that I'm quite intrigued by what happens here. It's very different. And then through that, I sort of became a junior pharmacist being trained up into critical care. And for the love of it, I then applied to become a senior pharmacist within critical care as well, in the same organisation at King's. And I was quite fortunate because we were a small ITU then. We were only 30 beds, and now we're 98 beds. So over the whole time, my career in critical care has been like growing this service. So as I became a specialist pharmacist, then after a few years, there was the opportunity to be the team leader, which is like, at that point, I was like, oh, can I do this? And I thought, right, I'm going to give it a go. And I did that for 9 years. So I was the sort of place where, the beds kept growing and you're sort of trying to get the resources in. And it was a real challenge, but it was a real learning curve as a team leader in critical care. And I sort of realised that actually this is the passion. This is what I really enjoy doing, that I want to be an expert in this field and in this area. And I think once COVID happened, and obviously the effect it had on critical care, I was there through the thick of it. I sort of realised after that actually the work I was doing during COVID was sort of national work as well, because they needed expert advice around certain drugs. And I thought, actually, there's opportunities here for pharmacy outside of just my own organisation. And somehow we're really fortunate that a consultant job came up at King's after COVID. And I was like, I've got to go for this one. And I was really fortunate. And one of these people that I've only ever worked in one hospital, but I've just had that journey where actually doors have opened at the right time. And yeah, so I've been a consultant pharmacist now for 4 years. But when I started, it was like the end of COVID. So I didn't really get into it for about a year later. And then now I'm I would say I'm in my job properly, realizing actually it's a big job. and there's a lot to do and a lot to gain. And it's very different to what I thought it was going to be.
But that's really exciting as well for the people who you work with, whether that's people within critical care who are in your team, because you are a role model. You're an inspiration to other people. You've stayed in an organization for a long time, which it's not a common thing nowadays.
I know.
And it's not that one is a bad idea and one is a good idea. Actually, being loyal to an organization is a really, really cool thing to do. Really, really nice for you to see the ins and outs and the growth of a department. But I also like the idea of moving, because I've moved to lots of different places and been really fortunate to experience lots of different healthcare settings in the UK as well as outside the UK. And it's just given me some insight into healthcare that I probably wouldn't have seen if I had stuck to the same organisation. But when it comes to juniors coming through as rotational members of staff, whether that's band 6s or rotational 7s, or you've got trainee pharmacists who might spend, a few days or a week with you, they see your pathway and they see that as an inspiration. So it's a real, you're advocating for our profession and at the top level, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think also what I've been very fortunate is to have really good mentorships and really good line managers, and I think that's really sort of helped and supported me staying in one place. And from a critical care point of view, having the support of things like your clinical directors and the team, I think part of critical care is that nice team working. So you've got people that sort of value you, and they actually can see there's a need of having a consultant pharmacist. So they actually are the ones that put the sort of money up to be able to make this post happen, which has been really good.
Yeah, I mean, I have had the same experience with paediatric palliative care. We've been really fortunate that they had paid for my position because, again, they value the role and expertise of a pharmacist. And I'm not working anywhere near a consultant level, but they really value the expertise that comes from pharmacy. Yeah. They know that we know the drugs in and out, or we can find the information if we don't know answers to questions. But we also have insight into, especially in pediatrics, whether it's unlicensed medicines, excipients, kind of looking at different types of formulations and routes that are unique to pediatrics, that they don't have the expertise. And they're so grateful to have someone on the team that can support them on that journey, which is so nice. Do you feel like your role as a consultant pharmacist has kind of made an impact on a bigger scale outside of pharmacy when it comes to kind of advocating for our profession, or maybe in terms of policies and driving policies forward? Has the role helped you with that?
Yeah, so I think once I became a consultant pharmacist, I also did my master's straight after. So I have a master's in health economics, policy and management. And I think that was sort of a turning point to me realizing actually there's lots of things you can influence, like you say, policies and stuff outside of pharmacy. And within critical care, we have a network. So nationally, we have an expert group of critical care lead pharmacists. So there's like 15 to 20 of us. And we sit in sort of national bodies. So an opportunity came up to say, actually, would anybody be interested to be a pharmacy representative for the Intensive Care Society? And this was sort of as I got into my consultant post. And I thought, don't know what this is about, but let's give it a go. And I think that was what opened opportunities. And that's where I realized that actually one part of being a consultant pharmacist is you have to look for these opportunities. Things don't naturally come to you. So I'm quite fortunate. So from inception of becoming a consultant pharmacist, I became the chair of the Pharmacy Advisory Group in the Intensive Care Society, which is a multi-professional charity, but it's a national charity. So it's the biggest multi-professional charity in the UK. And through that, it was a meeting new people, learning curve. And I had to build a group. So there's 10 of us in this, what we call a professional advisory group. And I chair the pharmacy group. And suddenly it's a bit like people know there's pharmacists out there. There's pharmacists in critical care. And actually when people have queries that come to the Intensive Care Society, if it's drugs, if it's a policy. So I've been influential in policies around transferring patients. So if you're transferring patients from A to B, what are the drugs that need to be, what drugs need to be taken? So, being involved in actually having a national document so hospitals know what to do. I think some of the big things that have come from doing that role is being involved with NHS England. So after COVID, there was an adult critical care workforce group that was set up with pharmacy in it. And so I sat in that first meeting feeling very daunted, going, oh my God, it's all very nursing and medics. And I think I said one word saying that you need pharmacists as part of critical care. And it's not just pharmacists, it's pharmacy technicians and it's pharmacy assistants. And through that sort of one meeting, we managed to get a task and finish group just for pharmacy. And we've been running that for 2 years, and it only finished in March this year. And through that, last year, we published a workforce strategy for NHS England, which we have sent to all chief pharmacists, saying that this is actually what critical care pharmacy needs to look like in all hospitals. We've also been involved with NHS England around the stock take. So actually, we actually have guidance called GPICs, which tells you how many pharmacy ratio you should have to beds. And we're trying to push that agenda nationally to say everybody needs to have unwarranted variation. So it's been really good to sort of get involved, work with other stakeholders, etc. And then the other side was after COVID, there was a lot of money that was put into education, especially critical care, and thinking if we were to go through this pandemic again. So last year we were given some money in which we worked with HEE to put a national critical care training program for pharmacists, and that's just gone live a month ago. So it's the pilot program for a year, but it's been really good to influence and actually, like you say, advocate pharmacists need education. We need a workforce. And it sort of also gets recognition that, you know, pharmacists aren't sort of just come onto the ward and they go. They're actually able to speak and work at a much higher level as well, which has been really good, really rewarding.
That's awesome. Have you worked with Catherine McKenzie in your journey?
I have.
Yeah,
many times.
Because obviously I interviewed her recently
Okay.
on one of my podcast episodes. She's amazing. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, she's been discussing on the podcast. So I'm raising awareness of it, because if anyone hasn't listened to that episode, they should also go back and watch it. Because from a critical care point of view, she's been in the thick of it for so long.
She has.
And when it comes to advocating for pharmacy, she's a legend. So it's really nice to kind of showcase things from a critical care point of view, because so much has been happening in that space.
I know.
The growth is incredible. I mean, I used to work with Mark Borthwick as a resi. You know, he was still is such a legend, but played a big kind of part in my growth in hospital pharmacy, because he was a role model for me when I first qualified. And working with him on the ward was one of those kind of experiences where you think, I want to be like this. And though critical care wasn't my jam, and it is one of those things as band 6, which is quite daunting, right? And quite scary.
But you're on call and the phone goes. It's like, oh, it's critical care.
Yeah, when it's critical care, you do kind of skip a heartbeat because it's worrying as to what type of query might be on the other side. Because you don't have that much exposure to it. So we knew we could always have him as a backup call, and he was always really helpful. Still is to this day.
Still my backup. So he actually interviewed me for my job.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So he interviewed me for my job, and he's one of my mentors. So we meet every couple of months as mentorship.
Yeah, he's lovely. And it's really nice to hear that you've also worked with Catherine as well.
Yes.
That's really cool. I love that. And pharmacy is such a small world, because we're always, every episode, we've talked about people that we both know. And like, you know, it's, you know, you can build such a good network within pharmacy. Obviously, this podcast helps me a lot with building a network, but it's really nice that pharmacy is small enough where you can meet lots of people on your journey.
And I think it's also like the people you named, Kathy and Mark, they're all the people when we were younger, we aspired to. So it's sort of making sure we keep, you know, some sort of legacy going for them, but ensure that the sort of junior pharmacists are all coming up as well and getting those opportunities, which is what's great about having that sort of family unit.
Yeah. I love that. Do you think you could give us like an example of a specific experience where you've used your expertise as a consultant pharmacist and how it's kind of impacted maybe a patient journey or a patient care?
Yeah, I mean, I won't mention COVID, because I think I felt like that was a bit of a storm in a teacup. But I guess other things that I've been involved in is like, so because I work in a large teaching hospital, we've got a tertiary centre, we're one of the biggest in the country, ITUs. So we do get a lot of, the case mix is very interesting. So we had a really good example where we had a patient that came in, that came from Jamaica, and they had a parasite inside them. It was strongyloides, and I had never heard of it. And half the consultants had heard of it, but no one knew how to treat it. And what was really interesting is when we spoke to places like Talkspace and the National Tropical Hospital of Diseases, they wanted us to give a drug which, when we looked it up, didn't exist for human use. It existed for animal use. And I was a bit like, and apparently they do use a veterinary medicine in a human being. And no one knew, how do we do this? What do we need to do? Where do we get the drug from? So my first job was actually thinking about, it's not just about just getting the drug in. There was so much to think around unlicensed use. There was ethical, there was consent, there was administration. And I think I spent a lot of that time learning that actually it's all time critical stuff. You haven't got time to wait a day to do this inquiry. So you have to reach out to your networks. You need someone senior that you can bounce your ideas off. And I think that was a really good example where I learned a lot about not just drug administration, having to get this medicine in from a vet, was how do you get the medicine in? What rules, what consent do you need? What about the patient consent? Because remember, in critical care, a lot of the patients can't consent. So all of that, legal, ethical, professional stuff was really good to showcase. Actually, as a consultant pharmacist, you're not just thinking very much day-to-day stuff. You've got to think much into the bigger picture. So that was a really good example of where I actually got to use skills outside of just my day-to-day clinical knowledge and stuff.
That's interesting.
It was really interesting.
And I'm sure, because actually, like you said, your critical care unit is quite huge.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is in comparison to St. Thomas's? Because St. Thomas's have a massive critical care as well.
Yeah, they have. I think they have, we have about 10, 15 beds more than them.
Oh, interesting.
And then we've got another site, the Peru, with another 10 beds as well.
Just to add on.
Yeah, just to add on. We're growing. We did open 60. We opened a new critical care centre.
Okay.
And that was 60 beds. And then we closed some old beds and stuff. So, we're sitting at about the 98 at the moment.
Let me tell you a story that starts in the sun-drenched fields of Spain, where you'll find a leaf that holds the key to wellness, the olive leaf. Hand-picked with precision, these leaves are then gently milled into a powder, ensuring they remain stable during transportation. Once transported to a state-of-the-art facility, you'll find that the magic unfolds. Using innovative processes, a potent bioactive called elenolic acid is extracted from the powder. It is thoroughly tested for potency and purity to meet strict EU and UK food standards, ensuring the best quality product is provided to you. Finally blended with organic moringa leaf for added gut health support, each batch undergoes rigorous testing to pharmacy standards. And the benefits? Olive leaf is a safe and effective natural supplement which will protect and support your immune system. It can be taken either to help prevent you getting ill or during periods of illness to aid recovery. Intrigued? Head on over to thenakedpharmacy.com to find out more information. Use code PD20 for 20% off your purchase today. I mean, critical care is such an interesting place because you do get that variety.
Yeah,
anything and everything can come through the door. So you are a generalist, but a specialist all at the same time.
I always say that when people go, it's general ITU. It's specialist, but it is general because you have everything that comes through the door as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like it. And it's fast paced.
Yeah.
But also you must get some long-term patients as well.
Yes, you get the ones that sort of might come to St. Thomas's, to Lane Fox, or like the tracheweens and stuff, or have to go to specialist ITUs that are for long-term care rehab. But I guess from a day-to-day basis, you get everything from overdoses, things I'd never even heard of people taking. I mean, I had one great example where a patient had put ant powder in their flat and actually didn't open the windows after and ended up falling asleep and then taking it in and ended up with a condition where we had to get some drug from a poisons unit. And it was just like, wow, I've never heard of this. But a lot of these things we try and write up after as case studies because they're actually interesting for learning in other areas as well.
That's awesome, actually, because when you think about it, you're working at a consultant level and it's a nice reminder to tell people actually you don't know everything, that new things will come through the door, new things will find a way to approach you.
Yeah.
And you have to find opportunities to learn. And I love that you turned that into a case study. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And last week I was at the Intensive Care Society conference in Liverpool and I was one of the judges for the post abstracts. And it's really interesting for me because I was asked to judge obviously pharmacology and toxicology. So I got to see people's work and go, oh, that's really interesting. And also I'm learning things as well from other people, whether they're junior or senior or different disciplines, because I think that's sort of like why you're able to push the boundaries, because you get to work with other people as well.
Yeah. It's good that you've mentioned that, because when you get to the point of consultant level, you get invited to conferences, maybe as a keynote speaker or being on panel discussions or reviewing people's abstracts and kind of doing competitions. So that's cool. That's really exciting, because you're at that level where you can be a judge.
I know, but it's so nerve-wracking. So
do you think?
So I did my first external speaking as a consultant pharmacist 2 years ago, and I was asked to talk about, my topic was dosing in renal failure in critical care. And I'm not joking, I walked into this auditorium and I was like, oh, it's like 1,000 seats in there. And I was like, oh my God. And you have to stand in the front and you've got a screen in front of you and they mic you up. And I was like, wow. But it was amazing because I saw the Twitter feed after and things. And it was like, what I've learned as being a consultant pharmacist, or even a pharmacist, you think everyone knows what you know, but they don't. And you sometimes sort of think to yourself, oh, well, I'm teaching them stuff they know, but actually you realize that it's new for them and it's rewarding for them to know this stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, that brings me to a kind of great question I wanted to ask, like, what lessons have you learned along the way? And I love that you bring that into the conversation, because it kind of shows the vulnerability of your role and who you are, and not realizing how awesome you are. But like, it just showcases that everyone, you can be at this amazing consultant level. You can have all the experience, all the knowledge inside, but actually to do public speaking can be hard for anybody. Even when you get to the point where you're 15, 20, 25 years experience, it's still nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah.
You still feel like, is this information that's going to be valuable for other people? But then when you get that feedback and you're like, I helped people learn today, I educated, I did a great presentation, and it's not until you do it and you put yourself out your comfort zone
it's true
that you realize the impact.
And it's funny because you do those things and then people have heard your name, and then suddenly you get asked to do other things, and then you suddenly, it sort of spirals into suddenly you're doing so much more stuff than you actually thought you were ever going to have to do, which has actually been, at national level, I've had to do moderating at conferences now. I've had to mark doctors' presentations. So it's sort of, I'm learning skills that I probably have not really learnt, especially around, I'm always been very pharmacy focused, and now I'm thinking actually it's a lot bigger when you're a consultant in a consultant role.
That's interesting that you say that, because it is really valuable to know that there are some unexpected elements of becoming a consultant pharmacist, because you focus a lot on the portfolio and building that in the specific areas of education and research and leadership, as well as your clinical expertise. But when you get to the point where you fall into these roles, or you get awarded these roles on a national scale, people see you in a different light, and you get opportunities which you probably never thought as a pharmacist that these would happen. 10 years ago.
Yes. And I think that would come back to the question you were asking me about advice. And I think one thing I've learned is especially go outside of your comfort zone. I think it's very easy. I mean, I could have just stayed in my own trust and carried on doing what I was doing, but I realized I had an appetite of learning and developing. And I think with my old team leader post, I'd done it for 9 years. I could do it with my eyes closed. I was like, I need that challenge. And I think this is bringing me that challenge. And I think once you start doing things externally, even when it starts small. So originally when I started my consultant post, I was invited to some COVID meetings, because we were doing some guidelines on anticoagulation. And I was nervous to speak, because I was a bit like, if I say something, it gets written down, it becomes a policy, And then through that, other things have sort of opened up, and especially around research. It's like I've sort of had a few emails around, I'd be interested to help with a research study, all drugs related, but actually the people might want a pharmacist. They think, oh, I saw you at that conference, I saw you here. Actually, would you like to be involved with things? So it's sort of been nice to network. So I think one of the things I would always advise is that be open-minded, take opportunities. Even if they're not in your comfort zone, you've always got other people around you. So I've had to speak to people like Mark and Kathy when I'm not sure about something. So I'm not doing this on my own. I've got other people that I think, oh, what do you think of this idea? Do you think that sounds sound? So you've got to have a network of people at this level to sort of support you, because it's quite hard when you're a consultant pharmacist, because if you think you're one consultant pharmacist in that specialty where you work, whereas there's 50 consultants in critical care or another specialty, so you don't really have people that know your area together. So you sort of need to have that sort of network at a national level.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the other episodes as well, that when it comes to networking and mentorship, these are two really valuable elements within this pathway. You need people around you, friends, colleagues, doctors that you work with, and not just in pharmacy. You've got to go outside that scope and meet people who might be able to support you in different ways, in different experiences. And they give you insight that's not going to be the same as what a pharmacist may say to you, because sometimes we are not narrow-minded, but we're in our own little zone, aren't we? We're in our lane. And sometimes we need to think bigger than that. We need to think outside the box. And one of the greatest things I think about becoming a consultant pharmacist is the voice.
Yes.
You get this voice that can impact patient care on a national or global scale. And you get to go to all these amazing conferences. Your name gets out there, and then people recommend you for more things. I mean, have you ever had to say no to things because too many things come your way?
I'm really bad at saying no. And it's so funny because, like, I've just been in conference last week, and then it's only been 4 days. I've had an email this morning from a hospital down south about being part of a big study that's going to NIHR. And I'm like, I can't say no to this. This is an opportunity you're not going to get to do again. And then the other thing I've recently put my hat in the ring for is I've just become the chair for education for the Intensive Care Society, literally 6 weeks ago, because their opportunity came up, and I spoke to them, and I thought, you know what, let me give it a go. And this is not even related to pharmacy. It's a multi-professional role where I'm thinking about education, study days, learning events, accreditation of courses across the whole of every discipline in intensive care. And that's really, and it's interesting because I'm the first pharmacist ever to do this. So up until, for the last 50 years, it's always been a medic. So suddenly they get a pharmacist. But it's really interesting because I thought I would be seen as, oh, you're not a medic. You can't do this. But it's actually been interesting that, the relationships change with other people as well, because they suddenly see that actually you've got a pharmacist doing this. You bring a different side to it all. And you're more, you can be more inclusive around other disciplines because, like you say, pharmacy sometimes get hidden away, and it's like bringing them into the limelight again.
Absolutely. And that's awesome.
It is good.
I think that the consultant pharmacist role is really helping to step up what pharmacists are capable of, because they're really helping to bring that voice to us. They're doing things outside of pharmacy on a national scale, which are allowing other pharmacists to then kind of get involved because they're actually showcasing who they are. And suddenly you've got this pharmacist, like you say, 50 years has been a medic, and suddenly it's a pharmacist. That's cool.
The bar's high.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm proud of you. That's really cool. That's really exciting that we get to showcase this on the podcast as well. I am going to ask you a wing it question, which you're going to hate me for, but actually, because you're involved in so many things, and it's really cool that you're involved in so many things, how do you manage your time? Because that's a genuine question, because I can see that you've got lots of hats on. You're doing your job. You're involved in lots of national groups. You're getting involved with research and some studies. You're getting involved with education. Like, that's amazing. But how do you manage your time?
It's not easy. It is not easy. I think it's also sort of, I do have a team under me. So I've got 10 pharmacists under me within critical care. So what I try to do is work out give them opportunities as well. So I try and get my deputies to take on bits of stuff that I have taken on for them as well. I think I've also am learning to sort of give people deadlines of where, and people say, can I have something done next week? I'm a bit more better at saying I'll do it, but try and work it around so I'm not working morning and night and weekends. But it's a really hard one to balance, because sometimes things come in really quickly and you've got to act, especially when it's national stuff, because their deadlines are not around your deadlines. But other things where it's sort of like I have a bit more control in, usually I would say, well, actually, I can't do anything in the next 2 weeks. Can we move this there? I think the consultant pharmacist, what I've realised is you sort of create your workload. And where, if you really can't do it, then you've got to say no, which I'm not brilliant at, but I'm just trying to work out, actually, I need leave. I need to spend time with family. So it's sort of trying to work out, making sure I have that balance. And I'm right now I'm into fitness quite a lot. So I need to make sure like my time out I'm training for High Rocks at the moment. So I'm spending a lot of time sort of making sure that I have that headspace, and go and do other stuff that isn't just work, making sure I get that balance in.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. It is tough. And I love, and Chloe talked about this as well, that when it comes to saying yes to a lot of things, and even Joe talked about it as well, it is really hard to say no, because when you love your job that much,
yeah, I do.
You say yes to every opportunity because at the end of the day, it's of interest to you. Yeah. And it's exciting and it's within your kind of passionate space, right? So you want to get involved. You don't want to have FOMO and not get involved, right? Part of it's that. But also when you do have a team, it's exciting that you can help others rise. You can help others gain the experience that they're craving and they're looking for and they need in order to become better pharmacists and reach the top of their game. And you've got people that you can delegate to, which is great. And that's part of the journey, isn't it? In this pathway, learning to actually share the work with other people so they can become better as well.
Yeah. And I think also like last week at the conference, 3 of my pharmacists had a abstract. So they got to come to Liverpool as well. And I think for them, it was a bit like, we've never been to a conference before. So they were just in awe at how exciting it was and, all the talks and how different they are. It's not just pharmacy talks because it's a multidisciplinary conference. So they got to learn about different things that are happening. And I think that really opens their eyes to go, oh, I want to carry on in critical care. Oh, this is really interesting. What else can we do, sort of thing.
And you managed to take 3 people.
Yeah.
That's good.
It was hard work. We had to make sure the ward rotors were covered.
That's always the basic minimum in the hospital. It's like, who can cover the wards so we can escape, have some fun, but also showcase who we are.
Exactly. And that was really nice because then it was like within our hospital, lots of doctors were there, consultants were there. So it was good that pharmacy were there as well because they all know each other. So it feels like actually you're part of, you know what's happening outside of your 4 walls of the hospital.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was really good as well.
Well, I'm super happy for you. You've obviously got a very kind of niche area that you're genuinely in love with. You're really passionate about it and you're making so many kind of changes within your team on a national scale and attending lots of conferences and doing things probably outside your comfort zone.
Oh, yes. Outside my comfort zone is a very good one.
So thank you so much for joining me on this episode and making time for us today.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Thank you to you guys for tuning in to this 6-part series. If you haven't watched the previous ones, make sure you go back and watch it. And I hope to see you in the next week.